and take your flat squeegee and pull a nice flat edge. A nice, flat, even pull. You could leave it like that. At this point would be the point where you'd want to pull the tape off, so that you would cut the perimeter of the sill proof into a nice, even cosmetic line. And while we're here, let's pretend you were using vinyl ester resin in your application of the, or installation of the windows. Obviously you couldn't have any kind of digging out from underneath these aluminum pads. It would be quite a monumental task to do. So what we did for a vinyl ester installation, we made these wooden jigs. It's nothing more than a piece of plywood cut with about 3.5 inches worth of throat here, and I drilled a hole into the top and just took a straight piece of all thread and just screwed it in to where it screwed loosely but still had some sort of clamping pressure. My application of the clamping of the window would consist of 4 of these in this particular window, 1 in each corner of the window, 1 here, 1 here, here, and then here, making sure that in the placement of it with hot glue along the bottom edge, either as a fillet down the side or a little bit of hot glue on the bottom, that this distance here, when you go to screw it down, it would hold right where there was a pad, a riser pad, just as before when you clamped it with this cleco, wing nut cleco, it would push right down on a pad. And by leaving it back just a little bit, you still have capability of coming in here with a tool and making your way around it. That way you're able to leave an entire perimeter as you want it with the vinyl ester. You don't have to come back and doctor it up or fix it. You can leave it flush, or in my recommendation for a vinyl ester fillet, because it's so brittle, I would pull a slight radius in it, maybe with a full-size tongue depressor rather than pulling a tongue depressor down to a smaller radius like this. Use the full width of the tongue depressor and the radius that it comes from the factory, and just give it a slight little radius. That would help in any cracking that may occur in there. Okay, in the interest of time on the video, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here and pretend like this window is ready to install, and pretend that you've got the reveal cut back and it taped off and everything ready to put your pilings in. What I want to do is I want to just sort of describe what I look for areas that need pilings and placement of the pilings. With the window at rest and the joggle, you can go around and you can push on the window, and you can see in this corner where the factory has got their black mark here from trimming it. See, it moves a little bit. It's springy. You probably want to clamp there, so with my tape out here, I take my wet erase and I make a mark like that to show that that's where I'm going to put a piling for a riser. You come back around, you can see there's some play in here too. So I probably want one in there. And then you can look at the length of this window. In a flat area like this, you're probably going to need to support it in probably, say, 3 spots. You may not need to clamp it there, but you're certainly going to need piling. So put a piling, and put a piling. And then over here in this corner, it's springy, so I'd probably want to put a piling and a clamp. So I'll clamp this corner, I'll clamp this corner, I'll clamp that corner. And we got a long area here that's kind of springy. So I'm just going to put 2 pilings here, and probably have to put a clamp right here because this is actually proud of the joggle. So when we lift it all up to grade, this will still stay proud, so it'll definitely need to be clamped right here to bring it down. Corners are always a good place to put a piling. And this is all low in here, so when we raise it, it might be okay. So for the time being, I'm just going to say we're going to put 2 pilings here and put a piling in the corner, 1 piling here. So you've got probably what looks like every 8 inches or so, 6 inches, you've got a piling. But it looks like we're going to need 1, 2, 3, 4 clamps. Probably since this corner is unsupported and unclamped, it would be wise to put a clamp there. Although I can't tell you exactly where until we get the pilings in and we start fitting it. And if you have any kind of spring up that when you push it down, say we're going to fit this piling, you push this window down and you check your height. If that window springs up from that point, you're definitely going to have to put a clamp there. If it doesn't spring up, just your pressure will hold, just your pressure of you pushing it down the first or second time of pushing, when you glue it in, will hold it down. Again, on the long flats, on the top and the bottom of this door window, you may end up needing to put another clamp at the top and maybe one in the middle. So by the time we're done, worst case scenario, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 clamps. That should get it. You just don't want to miss an area here if you've got it fit to depth and you push it down and you've got this even. If you release it at rest and it comes up, it'll stay up when the glue cures. When the seal-proof cures, you'll have a proud window somewhere where you didn't clamp. So, like I say, once it's all your pilings are adjusted to height, you can pretty much tell where you're going to need it by the springiness of the window. And here we're going to show you a little bit of the technique on placing the pads for the quarter window. You'll notice that when I place the quarter window in as cut from the factory, you'll see a little edge here that's been a tad bit overcut with a routing process when they've trimmed it. That's not really that much of a concern, especially on the quarter windows, and the location is because you'll be able to trim and scribe the bottom and the top a few times first to reduce the size of it to allow the window to slide back, thus closing this up a little bit. Then you can scribe the back and the sides and maintain a uniform 3/16 or 1/8 of big 8 gap all the way around. And as that slides forward, obviously you'll open the front up, so you're going to be limited to the amount of material that you can take off the top and the bottom of the window to make this come back before the front opens up too much. In this particular window, most of the quarter deck windows, because they're bent and curved from a flat sheet, they have a slight bit of spring back. You can see that this part of the aft section of the window is quite springy. It's trying to come back to its natural state, as well as the front and lower corner is quite springy. Those two areas are going to need clamps for sure. And what we're going to try to do is I'll explain how I'm going to locate the clamps and what to look for. This obviously is going to take a clamp, and when I hold this down, I push in here a little bit. It's still got a tad bit of spring to it, so I'm going to need a clamp here and here. And adjacent to the clamp, I'm also going to need a pad to maintain a stop so that when you tighten the clamp up, the window won't go below grade. That's especially important on the door windows, at the lower portion of the door window where the door bubbles out and comes back in. It leaves the joggle area at an angle, so if you tighten up that clamp too much, you'll actually depress the window a little bit deeper than it needs to be, even though at rest it was flush. So be sure not to over-tighten the clamps. So we need 2 clamps here and 2 pads. The top, again, is in the door window. You're going to see a long straightaway, which is going to need at least probably 2 pads, maybe 6-8 inches apart. Then a pad in the corner. And then coming down here, you probably get away with maybe 1 pad in the middle, and then a pad down here in this corner, or maybe 2 pads, because you may need to put a cleco on either side of the corner. And again, wherever the cleco, you think the cleco is going to go, make sure there's a pad there. On the bottom, it looks like it's going to be pretty good because we're low here and we're springing high here. So when you put your pad here, and here on your window, they'll keep the window at grade, and you'll bend it around those two pads a slight bit when you clamp this aft edge and when you clamp the front lower edge. So we're going to have two pads in the aft corner with Cleco clamps, two pads in this corner with Cleco clamps, a pad here, a pad here, a pad at the top, a pad at the top, and probably one pad here. That's going to yield us 4 clamps with an unsupported corner, unclamped corner. So I would recommend putting at least minimum of 1 clamp up in this corner. And that'll give you a total of 5 clamps, it looks like, for this window. If you're concerned about it, what you can do is you can, after you get your color on and you've got all your window masked off and you've got your pilings installed and you're ready to install your window and you drill your holes, you can dry fit your window without sill-proof. You can actually just clamp the window in place, and with these 2 clamps and these 2 clamps and 1 clamp in the middle, you can go around the edge now that your hands are free and see where the window is going to need another clamp if it does, and that way you can go ahead and drill your hole and be prepared for it prior to installing it with a sill-proof. What we're going to do now is show you a little bit about the window installation. Window installation is a little bit more complicated because of the size of it and the amount of perimeter that you've got. You got a lot of open areas, long areas on the top and around the bottom that are unsupported as far as any inconsistencies in the waviness of the window or the straightness of the window. Preliminarily, what you want to do is when you fit your top deck, you should have had your window out and fit your window to make sure that this all matches up in here, and what doesn't match you putty up and do a little bit of cosmetic putty work, bearing in this area. But you want to make sure that this joggle and this joggle are at the right height this way, so that when the window goes in, it beds down to the joggle. And this would cause this to be pulled down. At that point, you've rough fit it, just enough trimming on the window to let it fall into the joggle. There's no final fitting involved at that stage. When it comes time for you to follow through the steps that we went through on the top deck window, what you'll need to do is get the windshield located in place right here, and then ascertain where you're going to put your pilings. And again, you want to take a wet erase and just make marks on the hull where the pilings are going to go. And it's going to be the same way as you did on the quarter window, and it's going to be the same way you did on your door window. You're going to basically tape it down in position, because when it's not taped in position, you'll notice that there's some springiness to the window. So you tape it in position, and you're going to do the same technique. You're going to see that right here, this kind of springy, you're going to want to make sure that you put a clamp there. Also, especially across the top, you're going to need several pilings, probably about 4 inches apart, because it's about 1/8 of an inch thick, and you're going to end up with a window that goes like this if it's not supported uniformly across the top with a lot of pilings. So any problem areas that you find that are springy, now go ahead and ascertain where you're going to need your pilings. Like right in here, it looks like you're going to need one, and probably going to need a clamp. So make sure that you get at least 1 or 2 in this area. And again, you're going to probably end up, by the time you're done placing pilings, placing them about every 8 to 10 inches apart in the curved areas, and probably 4 to 6 inches apart in the straight runs up the sides and across the top. Here's some more springy at the bottom. That's definitely going to need a clamp. And again, up here at the top, the corner is going to need a clamp. You notice as I push here, this lifts up, so you may need to put a little clamp right here as well. Again, across the top, you're going to have to support it rather well. Once you get your pilings situated, and you're doing your trimming process of your window, I usually like to put my pilings on before I start fitting my windshield. And the reason for that, before I start scribing the reveal, especially on the windshield, what happens is, as the windshield is in the joggle this way, and your pilings across the bottom and your pilings across the top lift the windshield, that 3/16ths or 3/32 of an inch, it lifts it straight out. As it lifts it straight out, this is going to move that way. This doorpost edge is going to move out. So if you go ahead and scribe this now before you put your pilings on, and then you put your pilings on and the window lifts up, you're going to end up with a really fat gap along the doorpost, and it won't match the rest of the window. Now, a lot of times in the factory you'll find that it's trimmed a little bit too far here. Well, then you just have to shift your window back and forth till you find a happy medium when you're in your scribing process to make sure that it's all uniformly the same width of a gap around. Typically right now, I wouldn't do any scribing until the pilings went in. If you wanted to scribe it and get it close, instead of scribing with a 3/16 of an inch stir stick or a fat 1/8 stir stick, you could drop it down and get a really skinny stir stick and bring this down to just a uniform skinny 1/8 all the way around it, and not scribe any of the doorpost whatsoever on either side. You could scribe from here around and up and around this area. Now, if you wanted to, and especially stay away from the doorposts. Once you get that scribed and you're kind of happy and it looks pretty close, you can put your pilings in and do your finished scribe with your pilings in place. Once your pilings are in place, you'll want to adjust your height of the window. You do it the same way. You'll pull the window back a little bit, slice off a little bit of the piling, slice off a little bit, put it back in place, feel your perimeter, and just work your way all the way around the window until you're satisfied with the height. At that point, when you're satisfied with the height, you can come back through and you can mark where all your pilings are. You can mark where you want to put your clamps. You might find that a couple clamps down here, and maybe one clamp up in here and up in here, and maybe 2 clamps at the top, and then the same thing on the other side. You may end up with 10, 15, 16, 17 clamps on here. Each window is a little bit different, so I can't say for sure how many you're going to need. But that's going to be the same technique in truing up the joggle, in sanding the edge, the tape off. Everything's going to remain the same except for the final scribe of your width needs to be done while it's sitting on at the proper height in your standoffs. You scribe the inside, you tape it off, you true up your joggle, you do all the same stuff. You just follow the same rules, sand your joggle, and then the advantage to the sill-proof is this window might take you 45 minutes or so to get perfectly situated, cleaned up on the outside, cleaned up on the inside, all clamped. You still got probably another 45 minutes to an hour's working time with the sill-proof, so you're not under the gun trying to get the window in place prior to the curing process. Again, if there's any spring back, you want to make sure that you leave your clamps in place for quite some time, 2 days minimum, and then you go ahead and V out all the areas that you had your clamps, like we showed you, and make those patches, make those fixes. This is an example of the finished product of a window that's been installed with a sill-proof. We've got the even 3/16 of an inch reveal around the edges. You can see the uniformity of the color that we applied with no standoff showing through it, no air bubbles, and the crisp, clean line of the tape pull around the perimeter inside of the window. Same on the inside where we pulled a nice crisp line. and the tape dresses it out. Well, I hope the last hour and a half worth of tape has helped you out in learning our technique for installing windows with seal-proof and giving you some guidance if you decide to use the vinyl ester resin method. We've developed a lot of this technique over the last 3 years of installing windows, probably 30 plus sets of windows with no failures, no problems so far. So we're pretty happy that we came upon the system, and we hope that we can pass along and help your windows come out as nice as ours do. I hope it helped. Happy flying.